We will be recording this session, so those of you who have to jump out halfway through, or those who weren't able to make the class, will be able to view it at a later date. And you'll also notice if you scroll to the top of the chat bar, you'll see on the left hand of your screen, I've also uploaded the slides that I'm going to be presenting from today. So you will be able to look at those in more detail. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Steff. I am the Management Case Study and Operational Case Study Tutor here at Strategy Financial Training. I've been with the company for a few years now, and we've really seen growth in the case study market. And it seems that people really enjoy this approach that we do with the masterclasses. So you can also follow me on Facebook as well. I'll be putting more hints and tips on the lead up to the exam, and also for the strategic case study for those of you who are seeing the strategic case study in a few months' time. So let's get on with the class then. So just to let you know again that we are recording the class. We'll be able to do it later, and Joe will also be emailing out at a further date. And a quick thing on technical problems, few administration things here to get through. If you can hear me and see me, that's great. If you can't, then it could be a problem on your end. If all of you cannot see or hear me, then obviously it's a problem on my end, in which case I will have to do something about it. If it's just one or two of you who cannot see or hear me, then please email into the office to Joe, and he will deal with it for you. So let's crack on with the actual presentation now. So here is the content. Here's a list of the content I'm going to go through today. Key models and points, likely issues to come up in the exam, some tips, an introduction to Saturday's masterclass, the full class, which will be with Mary Jane, our full management case study tutor. And finally, we'll finish with a question and answer session. So let's crack on now with key models and points. I'm just going to minimize the webcam here to improve the size of the PowerPoint slide. So the first model I'm going to talk about is the value chain. Now, some of you may be thinking that value chain, isn't that more of an operational level thing? And it is larger at operational level than it is at management. However, it is part of the E2 syllabus. And the reason why I've chosen value chain as a key model for this particular case study, for the SparkSpace case study, is because that is how they generate a lot of their value. That's how they generate their business. They take a standardized service, a standardized product, and they add additional value to it before selling it on. So let's take a look at the 9 different stages within the value chain and how we can apply them to the case. So the firm infrastructure. This is your classic things such as your budgeting, the kind of budget system that they use at SparkSpace. We do not know which budget system they use at the moment because we were not told in the case, but we do know that they apply to the various accounting standards, to the international financial reporting standards, as was mentioned in the introduction to the precinct. So we know they have a proper infrastructure in that sense. They have proper accounting infrastructure. Next up is technological development or technology development. Of course, as a tech company, you would expect them to be at the cutting edge of technology, but also the fact that the precinct repeatedly mentioned the importance of innovation, the importance of new innovative products, innovative processes, the relationship that it has with the university through the Spark Innovate system, and also the rise in automation, how a lot of their production line was automated and that there was the opportunity for further automation. You'll remember that article in the precinct that spoke about smart robots, smart machines that are far safer and can be programmed a lot more than current ones. And human resources, of course, you'll remember from the precinct, a huge amount on human resources, several pages dedicated to the various different jobs that were on offer. So the company is expanding, it's looking for people, but it puts a lot of emphasis on training people. Every single job advert, from the lower order ones to the higher ones, had opportunities for training, opportunities for development. It shows you how important the human capital is to the organization. And procurement as well being very important, particularly given the diversified nature of, not the diversified nature, the lack of opportunity for diversification within the industry. I spoke at length about how they often have to just compete on price because there is no way that they can differentiate their product. Obviously, there's opportunity for that with the new high-performance computing systems, but with these standard servers, there wasn't. So therefore, they have to get the best hardware for the best price. And then onto our more primary stages within the value chain now. So we have the inbound logistics, quality control, making sure they have the best staff. Then operations, how they put the servers together, how they put those HPC systems together that could be thousands of servers at once. Then outbound logistics is obviously the service they provide, the consultancy services they provide. And then, of course, you have your marketing, your sales, and your after sales. I spoke in the pre-scene about the value that they put in their customers, how much they like to treat their customers well, and how important they are to them. In the adverts for the new jobs, it spoke at length about how you'll be expected to deal with any issues that customers may have. So it shows how much critical importance they put on good customer service. And this all goes into how they add value to their customers, how they take those services, how they add value, and then sell it on to the customer. Now, the next model I'm going to talk about is 5 forces analysis. The reason why I'm going to talk about this is because in the management case study exam, you're going to have to start thinking strategically. You're going to have to start thinking about entering new markets. And one of the main reasons to enter a new market is because your current market has got stale, it's stagnated. And one of the ways in which you can assess this, or one of the ways you can illustrate this, illustrate how uncompetitive or how unprofitable a market is by using a 5 force analysis, which of course you know is to assess the competitiveness of the industry. And we know from the pre-scene that it is a very competitive industry because there is little scope for diversification. We know that buyer power is quite high, or is medium high, because of the fact that there are so many different options. We have BitBunch, you have SparkSpace, there'll be others as well, and they all provide a very similar service, so the buyers can pick and choose. We know that supplier power is high, particularly for a few specialist things. In the pre-scene spoke about how it has to get, SparkSpace have to get some of their components from very specialist hardware manufacturers. And so that, of course, pushes the supplier power up high because we cannot, or SparkSpace cannot, fulfill their job, fulfill their role without having these special components. So in a sense, some of the suppliers can name their own prices. Although we do perhaps lower that force slightly by saying it's not exclusively rare resource, there are other people that we can get materials from. And also the fact that perhaps SparkSpace's buyer power is quite high in turn because they are a large company within the industry. Now, the third thing is competitors. We know it's a very competitive industry. We know we have large competitors. If you look at the financial figures for BitBunch within the pre-scene, we can see that they too have large revenues, substantial margins, a lot of capital. And again, the constant reference back to this idea that there's little scope for diversification that we saw throughout the pre-scene. Although SparkSpace, perhaps through some of their innovations, through some of their initiatives, have got new market opportunities through patents, etc., and the growth of the HPC market. So that could perhaps help lower the force of competitors because it will allow SparkSpace to go out on their own a bit more, to diversify, to provide a more diversified service within that particular industry. Now on to new entrants. And now the new entrants is quite high. It's not quite high from completely new entrants. as in businesses just sprouting out of nowhere, but it could be companies that currently do other hardware things, other software things, could decide to enter the server resale industry because there are distinctive opportunities. And of course, this is lowered though by the fact that we do need a very large workforce. We need a trained workforce. Not anyone could just start a server resale industry. But the threats are still quite high. The substitute is a bit lower. The main substitute issue, or the main threat from substitute, would be the growth in cloud computing. Because of course, cloud computing does essentially the same thing as this sort of server stack building industry, but it just does it over the internet, perhaps, rather than in-house, on-site, as it were. But where there is a threat, there is also an opportunity, because it does mean that SparkSpace can perhaps look to enter the cloud computing market. In the pre-scene, there were a few articles on the growth of cloud computing and the importance of cloud computing. So we know that the pre-scene has spoke about. We know the examiner is thinking about it. We know that it is an opportunity for SparkSpace. So those are some things that you'll want to think about, perhaps, if you are assessing a question which is perhaps asking you about possible new strategies, new markets for the company to enter. And the final model I want to talk about before moving on to the likely issues is the stakeholders matrix. Now, stakeholders matrix is incredibly important because whilst you may not be asked a specific question relating to the stakeholders matrix, you should always consider it. You should always consider stakeholders for every decision you make, for every question you answer, because that is how you earn your people marks in the management case study exam. By considering stakeholders, by showing that you are assessing the impact of your decision on the various stakeholders of the business, because of course a business is made of lots of different stakeholders. We cannot just do something that impacts one and doesn't, that benefits one and doesn't benefit the other. So the classic way of comparing stakeholders is using the Mendelow's matrix, and I've given you one here and just put some of the various stakeholders of SparkSpace. So in our minimal interest, our low interest, low power, we've got just the average occasional small customers and maybe some employees of suppliers, because of course if we are a major buyer from a certain supplier, their employees will be at least somewhat interested in what we do, because if we were to stop buying from them, that could affect their job. Then in the keep informed sections, the high interest, low power, we have our more regular customers who perhaps buy reasonable amounts of hardware and software from us. And also we have our own employees, because of course, whilst individual employees may not have that much impact on the business, be able to do that much to the business, they still will be very interested in what's going on. And of course, employees can become key players if they were to unionize. If there was a union between all the different employees within SparkSpace, then that would be a far more powerful stakeholder. And it's not completely unusual for a question on unions to come up in these case study exams, because it's a very real issue that many directors of organizations face on an almost daily basis. Next up, we have the keep satisfied. So this is the low interest but high power. The classic examples of this being the bank and being the government. Now, government's obviously very powerful, but generally try not to get too involved in what businesses are doing unless you're doing something wrong. So as long as SparkSpace pays its taxes, as long as they keep within the rules over employment, over safety, etc., the government should leave them be. Now, the bank, of course, for SparkSpace could be could have a lot of power because of SparkSpace's very high debt financing level. We saw in the pre-scene that SparkSpace had a huge amount of debt financing. Now, at the moment, this could be all relative. because BitBunch, of course, had very high debt financing as well. So it could be that that is just the way in which the industry works. There is a lot of debt financing within the IT or the server resale industry. But nevertheless, it was still over 3 billion Western dollars that was owed. So yeah, there's still a huge amount of debt financing, and therefore the bank could have a lot of power. And now finally, we move on to key players. So this is the big guys, the keep close people, the directors of the organization, major partners. Perhaps the Western Meteorological System would come under here as a major partner because of the huge deal that we've done with them to provide them with those massive HPC systems. And also internal and external regulatory bodies. So this would be bodies within the industry or within Westland, perhaps ensuring that information is kept secure. There's bodies perhaps that are in charge of ensuring that anyone who deals with IT, that deals with data, keeps that information safe and secure and can find them for any breaches in that security, any lapses in security, and possibly even kick them out of the collective, the union of companies, as it were. So that brings us to the end of the section on models. Does anyone have any questions relating to those? I'll give you 30 seconds or so if you've got any issues. Which areas of the F2 syllabus would I recommend? Well, I would recommend doing these, looking at the stuff relating to financial reporting. We know that the company does comply with the international financial reporting standards, but sometimes in these exams, there will be a case where some of their accountancy practices have not complied with that, and you'll have to explain why they haven't and what they can do to get around it, as it were. Not get around it, because we shouldn't be trying to get around things, but what we can do to correct it. Although I would advise you that F2 will be a lot smaller than P2 and E2. The case studies generally focus on the P's and the E's, because that's your more strategic things, your more analysis things. F2, F1, F3, etc. is far more theoretical. And the point of the case study exam is not to test your knowledge of theory, it's to test your application of strategy of theory, in a sense, but testing how you use it rather than your actual knowledge of it, to a real life company. Yeah, I agree that sometimes with the value chain, it's a lot harder to do for a service industry. But I do feel the way I explained it does explain how they add value, because that those things within the value chain are, in a sense, applicable to any kind of company, particularly the secondary ones, such as human resources, etc. And even from London, BitBunch, yes, they are also a server reseller. They are the main competitor within the industry, according to the pre-scene, at least. Now, with regards to ratios, if you look at our annotated pre-scene that you can find online on the Astranti website, we've actually done the ratios for you. I would add that you will not get marks for doing the ratios itself. There are no calculation marks in the case study exam, so I wouldn't waste loads of time going through and figuring out and calculating all the different ratios, because you won't get marked for that. However, you will perhaps get marks if you use the ratios to interpret what they mean, to analyze what they mean. So if you are looking at, say, the debt to equity level, we see the debt to equity level of the organization is very high. If you use the debt to the straight debt divided by equity ratio way of calculating gearing, it comes to 219%. So their debt is 219% of their equity. So that's incredibly high. Again, this could be all relative to the industry. Okay, so we'll move on now to likely models. I've just finished off this section here by giving you some key pre-seen points here. So the amount of stock that they put in research and development, the Spark Innovate initiative they have with the university, and the tangible results and intangible results that has produced. We know that they have a good brand, a good reputation. They have a lot of well-trained and experienced staff, and they put a lot of stock in that, as evidenced from those job adverts. There has been a growth in revenue, but there has also been a fall in margin. If you look at the predicted profit for 2016, it was quite a substantial decrease on 2015. In 2015, they had an operating profit margin of 34.6%, but they only predict an operating profit margin of 23.4% this time. So a big decrease in margin. Again, we also know it's a very difficult industry to differentiate. They have a possible capacity management issue, which could be an issue if they are looking to grow in the future. I spoke in the pre-scene about how they have a semi-automated production line and it's almost at full capacity. They have a very high debt level as well, as I've already mentioned, and possibly they have relatively low cash reserves. Now, they don't have a low cash reserves in a sense, but it could be that that's just the industry standard to have a very high amount of cash reserves, but then everything is going to be very expensive. If you look at some of those HP systems, they're going to cost millions each. Therefore, the fact that they seem to have reasonable cash reserves may not be the case. And two other things here, there was no real targets, goals, and strategies named within the pre-scene, but there is growth in the HPC market, and we saw that from the budgeted figures for next year. There was going to be an increase in HPC sales. Now, Julie from London has asked what reasons could there be for a growth in revenue but a fall in margin. The simple answer for that is that the levels of depreciation and amortization for next year are going to be significantly higher. If you look at the budgeted thing, there is a 520 million Western dollar figure for amortization, where there was a figure that was hundreds of millions less than that for the year before. So it could be that they are basically just capitalizing, or they're readjusting the value of some of their assets this year, and that's why there's been a significant drop. And it could be that the year after, in 2017, it all goes up again. And that's one of the issues with comparing just 2 years, is you do not get the long-term view, the long-term trend. And also Marie, who missed this first section, yes, it will be available. The video will be available after the class. I'm recording it at the moment, and it will be free to all of you who are attending this class after it has finished. So now on to likely issues. Now, first thing I've got here is management staff issue. And the reason why I've said that is because I've already spoken at length about how important staff are to the organizations, mentioned repeatedly throughout. It's also a very common issue in a management case study exam. And because nearly 40% of your marks relate to people and leadership skills, this is a key way to test your people and leadership skills. For example, if you have to deal with a member of staff leaving or staff threatening to strike, then you have to both consider the ethics of the situations, you have to consider the stakeholders. So of course you have to care for your staff, but then we have to think about the business as a whole. If the staff go on strike and as a result the business collapses, then everyone loses, not just the staff. At the same time, we have to have demonstrate strong leadership skills to come to a recommendation, to a decision of what we're going to do here. And that's why staffing issues are a key way to earn those people and leadership marks. And I've put a few things here about what could come up. For example, the CEO leaving, the head of innovation leaving, given that innovation is so important to the organization, staff asking for a pay rise or threatening to quit over issues with training or quality. We know that quality staff are hard to come by. We cannot just hire anyone. We need to hire people who have a certain set of skills because it's a very skill-heavy industry. It cannot just be done by anyone. It needs people skilled at using computers. It needs people with who are very innovative, etc. And so there's just some key points here that you could bring up, as in the issues that could happen if we lose our key managers. Research and development obviously being so important to SparkSpace if, say, the leader of innovation were to leave, the costs involved in finding replacements, and also potential investors as well might be rocked by issues relating to staff leaving. You know, if a CEO leaves an organization, you sometimes see, if it's a listed company that is, you sometimes see the share price fall. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we will be expected to start thinking more and more strategically at management level, not as much as strategic level, obviously, but it's still important to demonstrate that you are starting to think like a director, you're thinking strategically, and therefore the importance of your operations, the importance of the company's culture to treat its employees well, to care for its employees. Now, another issue here is project management. Now, again, project management is very, very easy to examine, and obviously examiners and exam writers are people too, and of course they will write questions that they can write well, that they know about and they'll like to write about. And of course, project management is a huge part of management level. People and project management is the title of the entire E2 syllabus. So you would expect project management to be a substantial part of the management case study. And it was also mentioned specifically as part of your role. At the start of the pre-scene, it did speak at length about the kind of things that you, as the financial manager, will be doing. And of course, as well, given the nature of the organization, this is what they do. They, in a sense, are almost a project management company. They go into organizations, they say what they can do, they then carry it out and execute it, and then deal with them during after sales service post completion of the project. So there was a lot of information given in the pre-scene about how they do this as well. So project management is a very likely question to come up in the exam. Now, it could be over anything really, overseeing a new product, issues with an existing project. Of course, that is a way in which they will exercise their after sales service, which we know is very valuable to them. And also issues with planning in general. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be something with a client, with a customer. It could be an internal project that's all gone a bit wrong. And so another key strategic points to bring up here when talking about project management, how important customer satisfaction is. We know that it's a very an undiversified marketplace where customers can perhaps switch easily. Therefore, we have to give them real tangible benefits for staying with SparkSpace, and good customer service is one of those things. We can also bring up the value of working to budgets, how important budgets are to good planning and good strategic management of the organization. Another thing as well, during the pre-scene, it did have a section from the CEO, who spoke about the organization, how much he was pleased with everyone who worked. And one of the things he considered to be very important was the reliability of SparkSpace, SparkSpace's employees, and SparkSpace's products and processes. And so therefore, it's very important to project management, or important to the organization, that projects are carried out reliably. And the final issue that I'm sure you are not surprised about at all is big data. Now, big data again was mentioned throughout the briefing. It ties in a lot with the HPC system, because HPC systems are in a sense used to analyze big data. And one of the main reasons why big data is so important is not just because it's obviously very important to the growth in growth in the HPC industry, which of course is a way in which SparkSpace can grow its business, but it's also incredibly important to CIMA. Now, big data was introduced during the syllabus change, and it features throughout operational management and strategic level. So it is a kind of issue, almost on that basis alone, the fact that CIMA view it as so important, so integral to the new syllabus, that it is likely to come up in some way, shape, or form, a bit like ethics. And so possible issues to come up relating to big data. You read in the pre-scene about the Western meteorological system. Now, that could be an example of a big data system. It's analyzing thousands or millions and millions of different lines of data and looking for very unique patterns and codes within that system. It allows them to formulate solid conclusions for it. Another issue could be that as part of the consultation services that SparkSpace provides, you could be asked to go into an organization and to basically tell them how big data could improve their organization. You might be given some information about the business that you're consulting with and what they want to achieve, because that's the main thing, is what is the client ultimately trying to achieve? What is their end game? If you are providing them with a system that does not allow them to meet their goal, then you are just giving them what you want to sell them, what you think they want, rather than what they actually want. So will a big data system, will a HPC system ultimately allow them to achieve their goal? Because of course, that is very important as well. We have to be thinking about what the customer wants, what our client wants, particularly as a client-focused organization. Some other points here to raise. Based on the pre-scene, the growth of big data was mentioned within the pre-scene, the markets for it, the growth in SMEs using big data. There was an entire article in the pre-scene dedicated to that. And it's also a way in which the company can grow, because of course the HPC market has allowed SparkSpace to diversify. And there is scope for diversification within that market in turn. And therefore, it's very important to the future of the organization. Now, the server resale industry is the bread and butter. It's the main thing within the organization. But will it always be that way? Is HPC market, is that the future? In 10 years' time, that will be the bread and butter of the organization. And finally, the key theory to use whenever you're talking about big data is the 3V's. So that's, of course, variety, the different types of information, the different sources in which it's coming from, the volume of it, the sheer magnitude of how many different lines of data for it, and also the velocity, the speed in which it comes in, the speed in which you are expected to process that information and turn it into a tangible conclusion. So now I'm going to go on to some key exam tips for you. My top 3 tips here are plan, manage your time, and read the question. So I'll take these in turn. So the reason why planning is so important is because it helps keep your mind free. Now, earlier on, one of the attendees mentioned about how they often don't type enough, how they don't write enough, or they can't get round to things. And planning is the best way to go around this, because you, in a sense, free up your mind. I'm going to use a lot of my studying experience here through this exam tips section. The issue is when you do not have a plan, you visualize your plan. Instead, you keep it all in your mind, and it's playing on your mind the whole time. You're thinking, oh, I need to make sure to put this in. I need to make sure to put that in. But if you, in a sense, offload it, unload all that information that's in your memory onto a piece of paper, it then frees up your mind to just write. This is what I did when I was studying, and I found it incredibly effective. So always make sure you write all your key, even if you just bullet point your key points or key phrases, key words even, that you can just instinctively look at, and you know exactly what you meant to write about that particular keyword. Then that will free up your mind. It will allow you to type more effectively. You won't be having to stop. And also you will, in a sense, hit more points because you know the points that you're expecting to hit. You can check them off as you go along, which of course in turn does allow you to manage your time more effectively. But that's not the reason why I put manage your time here. A lot of students often spend too long on the first section of a question. Now, often in an exam question, there'll be a couple of requirements per question, and each of those questions will roughly be worth roughly around half the marks of that particular question. And a lot of students will spend far too long trying to write a perfect answer to the first requirement, and then only have a few paragraphs for the second one. When I was at university, an interesting thing that I kept with me was one of my tutors said to me that you pick up between 60 and 70% of your marks in the first half of your answer. So actually, by saying if you've got 45 minutes for a question, we're going to write 22.5 minutes for part 1, and we're going to write 22.5 minutes for part 2. You will have a decent answer to both requirements. So you will get that 60 to 70% for each one. If you spend far too long trying to write a perfect ending to the first requirement, you will not get onto the second requirement. And as he said, you will not get as many marks for that second half to the first requirement as you would for the first half of the second requirement. So a good way to ensure you get more balanced marks per requirement is to manage your time, even if it means drawing a line and saying, right, I haven't finished this question, or I've not really finished this question, but 22.5 minutes is up. I'm going to move on to the next section. That may sound crazy and you may not want to do that. A lot of people think that's a ridiculous thing to do, but you will pick up more marks by having a good go at both requirements than you will spending too long on one. And finally, read the question. Now, this may sound like a bit of an odd one. You may think, well, what do you mean read the question? But what I mean is, what is the question actually trying to answer? Trying to ask, sorry. I had a story once when I was marking a mock exam. A student had answered a question on net present value. Now, in the question, they had given her a net present value equation and had asked her to assess the suitability of a project. Now, all she needed to do was look at what the NPV was and say, this has a present value of X, Y, Z, therefore financially it's going to be a benefit to the company, but blah, blah, blah. It could be, and bring in all the other things such as, how sustainable it is and how acceptable it is to the strategy. What she had done was seen that it said NPV and thought, right, I'm going to write everything I know about net present value. And so suddenly I was reading a list of advantages and disadvantages to net present value analysis and things that weren't even related to the company as well. It was almost a textbook list of advantages and disadvantages of net present values. And then it went on to all the different types and alternatives to net present value as well. And this was not in the question at all. There was nothing to do that. And I had to give her no marks for that section because she actually hadn't answered the question. She hadn't assessed the project. She'd seen that it was a net present value thing and just decided to write all she knew about net present value. So those are my 3 key tips. Plan your time effectively. Plan your answer effectively, sorry. Manage your time and also read the question. Let's read this quick question. So what you should do if you can answer part of the question, but you cannot answer the second half of the question, well, obviously that my recommendation of moving on to the next half doesn't necessarily work if you do not know how to answer it. What I would say, if you literally cannot answer another part of the question at all, it's almost wasted time to try and do it. You are better off trying to answer the things you can answer, or if perhaps there are certain sections you do know, if there are certain parts within that topic that you do know about, you just do what you can, because ultimately there are at times going to be times where you do not know how to answer a particular question, and to worry about it, to fret about it is only going to be counterproductive. If you literally cannot answer that part of the question, I would skip it and I would not think about it again. That's another exam point thing, is to not worry about things too much. A lot of the time when students have exams, they huddle by the door on the morning of the exam and they all talk about, oh, did you study this? Did you study that? And all you're going to do is put doubt in your own mind. Someone will say, oh, did you study financial reporting standards? And you'll just, oh no, I didn't. And then you'll go into the exam worrying, oh God, I can't believe I didn't read up on financial reporting standards. And so it's best to remove yourself from that. By the time you get to the exam hall in the morning, nothing else is going to happen. You're not going to have any more time. So remove yourself from a situation where you are going to put doubt in your own mind. Someone else has also said about marks for headings and correct email standards. I wouldn't worry about that, because in the actual exam you are given a format. You are given a to, from, regarding, etc. And also with headings, there's no actual requirement for headings, but it always helps. It always helps focus both you, as in you start writing to that heading rather than writing as a whole, and it also focuses the marker as well. They know the kind of thing that they are looking for. How to deal with staff demands? Someone's asked. Basically, you would have to weigh up the options available. What are they asking? Can we afford to pay it? If we can afford to pay it, we then have to consider whether we should pay it. So, for example, does it set a precedent? If we give in to their demands this time, will they just demand something else the next time? You have to consider all stakeholders involved, because ultimately the company needs to make profit. And if it doesn't make profit, the company goes under and everyone loses out, not just the employees. And someone has mentioned the price. So if you look at the price list, this was from the internally produced intranet. And it said that the list price is the price that should be quoted to clients. So that's basically the full price, as it were. And the market price is basically what they should never go lower than. So the general market price for, say, the departmental single socket is $1,800 Western dollars, but the list price, where we advertise it to customers, is $3,600 Western dollars. So We initially quote that, and then that gap in between the list and market price is, in a sense, our room for negotiation. So that's why risk register would come up. The chances are that, yes, there will be a question relating to risk, or at least you'll be expected to bring in risk. If you are talking about strategic development, etc., then you would mention risks to the business as well. So we're going to put all this money, all our eggs in this basket of expanding or moving into the HPC market, but perhaps the HPC market growth is going to need to be financed by the continued development and continued success within the server resale industry. And therefore, by looking at the risk register, we can see that there is a lot of risk to the current market because of aggressive pricing strategies from competition. And so therefore, it perhaps puts a hindrance, puts a risk, a doubt into our future strategy, because it's a risk to something that we will rely on to in order to ensure that our new strategy succeeds. I'm just going to really move on. I'll come back to the other questions. So just a quick introduction into Saturday's masterclass that will be taken by Mary Jane, our management case study tutor. And this is just a few lists of content, a list of some of the things that she's going to go through. So what the examiner looks for, what markers look for, and how to give them what they want. She's going to give you a few pre-learned paragraphs that can help save you time, that can help score you some extra marks by putting in a few key tips. Time management, one of the things I spoke about earlier and how important it was, but I didn't really go into too much depth about how you can work on your time management. That's what Mary Jane will be doing on Saturday. Are you playing the role that you are being given? After all, the management case study exam is supposed to be a real life simulation almost. You are the financial manager within the organization. Are you living up to that role? Are you playing that role how a financial manager should be? She's also going to go through lots of different industry examples, real life industry examples from the real life server resale industry, as it were. And finally, the top 10 issues for the case study. So now I will return to the questions. So are there any change management issues that we should be aware of? Well, of course, change management is one of those unique subjects, and it can appear in any way, shape, or form, because ultimately anything that involves a change requires change management. So going back to, say, staffing issues, for example, if there is going to be a movement in staff, there's going to be new staff members come in after purchasing an organization, or by hiring or moving people around because of further automation within certain divisions, that's all going to need to be managed. People are going to be moving through different divisions. People are going to be coming from elsewhere into a new culture, a new environment, and that, of course, will need to be handled. Any new company that they buy as well, lots of the perhaps the intangible assets of goodwill and stuff will be acquired by purchasing smaller companies, and any small companies that have to be absorbed into the organization, into SparkSpace, will have to learn the SparkSpace way of doing things. Now, with reference to Ansoff Matrix, any options that might be suitable for SparkSpace? Well, I guess with Ansoff's Matrix, you would consider trying to, in a sense, beat the competition on price would be your market penetration strategy. To try and grow the HPC market would be your product development, as that product is being developed and you are bringing it to new customers, as it were. Oh, sorry, to the same customers, as it were. You're updating, in a sense, the service that you are providing. Market development wise, there could be the possibility of perhaps trading abroad. There is a lot of developing countries at the moment are importing top IT services. So there is an opportunity there. And then, of course, your diversification strategy could be anything. So it perhaps could be producing more, in a sense, their own hardware and selling their own hardware as hardware rather than as a software service. Why are so many job descriptions given, and why are the jobs all very technical? Well, obviously, as a tech company that involves a lot of technical aspects, you would expect the jobs to be quite technical. What I would read from that is perhaps that the company is expanding, and therefore it requires new employees, and it requires employees of a certain caliber, because of course it has such a technical theme to the organization, technical job. It requires a lot of skills and requires a lot of intellect and knowledge. Probable question on the balanced scorecard. Again, this could, in a sense, apply to anything. The balanced scorecard is assessing all your financial and non-financial aspects. So again, referring to staff, it could be something as simple as staff satisfaction. We know that staff are incredibly important to the organization, and therefore keeping them satisfied is very important. One question I will bring up. The reason why I bring this up is because it is something that a few students have asked me in the past, and basically it relates to the computer system that SparkSpace has donated to the university, to the Western University. People have asked me if it is a joint venture or a special purpose vehicle, or is it something that should be disclosed? And what I would say to that is that the HPC system was not applied under a joint venture, but under a joint funding initiative with the Western government. So therefore, it's slightly different in that sense. And whilst SparkSpace are offering value as a free thing through support, it's just an expense. It's not necessarily related to any kind of joint venture. It's not, in a sense, a subsidiary of ours. It's just an expense. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Which costing technique is best suited for companies like SparkSpace? Well, obviously that depends on what they are selling. What they are costing, as it were. Now, the problem with the pre-seed at the moment is we have not been given that much information on the cost of certain things. We haven't been given any information on costs surrounding individual costs, at least, just the total cost. So to break it down into saying whether activity-based costing or traditional absorption costing is best is very difficult at this point in time. So it's something that you would perhaps look at the unseen for more information. It's worth noting that if it is if we are breaking things down to a very more individual product level, then activity-based costing, or batch level, so to speak, then activity-based costing would be best. If we are still producing on mass, then traditional costing would be best. And relative elements of project management tools and project management software to SparkSpace. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that likely issues were project management, and so your general project management tools such as your Print2 and other things such as work breakdown structures would be relevant to at least know about, and critical path analysis as well, etc. Budgeting, that also depends on how they do their costings, but obviously incremental costing is the easiest one, but possibly you are right, Julia, in saying zero-based budgeting, because zero-based budgeting fits best with any organization that has a high proportion of research and development spending. So I would recommend zero-based budgeting at this point in time. Could I recommend past case studies that where should be focused in light of SS's issues and concerns? Well, actually, there was a company called ABC Solutions in the November 2015 management case study exam that was a very similar company. It was a software providing company. And there were a lot of resemblances between SparkSpace and ABC Solutions. So if you are looking for past case studies, I would look at the ABC one, or you can look at the various mock exams relating to SparkSpace. Now we've overshot our 45 minutes by 10 minutes, so I'm glad you've all stuck with me. But I will let you all get back to work. I hope you found this presentation useful. And if you have any questions, please email them into the office and I will get round to answering them as soon as possible. As I said, the slides for this class and the video itself will be online shortly. Thank you very much.